This is a topic that is usually very underestimated because IT asset management, it's part of every security framework. It's even part of a normal IT framework. I mean, if you want to find some good links and good information and details about it, if you want to really get obsessed with this topic, use the abbreviation ITAM because there's an entire life cycle behind it, from basically deploying the assets or even acquiring the assets, then deploying them, patching, maintenance, whatever is required based on the asset type. And then, of course, change of ownerships, all these other things that are required to keep track of it and keep it in good health. And then as well, the decommissioning and the disposal. So there's a whole life cycle behind it. From a cybersecurity point of view, you should be concerned about knowing what your assets are, where they are, who's using them. I mean, part of NIST is in the identify section. It's for a reason, because, again, if you don't know what you're protecting, you can't protect it. And physical assets, but even also abstract assets, that's how I like to call them, which are more logical assets and or virtual assets. And you find a lot of naming convention for this, but it's basically assets that you may not be able to touch. So in terms of data or ownerships and even users at some point in time. What is important is that from a security point of view, you want to do proper inventory management. You need to know what you have in what quantities, what are the locations, be it virtual or physical, and you have to be able to identify, especially when there's more quantities. I mean, everyone knows it from the office, having a computer screen. Every computer screen looks the same. You would not notice if you switch the tables, but there's an ID so that you can literally say this screen was assigned to someone. But the same, and again, as simple as it looks for physical hardware where you can put a sticker on it or a barcode or QR, for digital assets, it's harder. I mean, with servers or cloud rooms, it's still acceptable because you have a certain group of users that represent the ownership group. Files will be harder because you can't tell who put the file there, who touched it, who moved it, who tampered with it. And even harder with snippets of code or any other resources that you may use in your system development. Sure, you can have repositories for it, keep the code snippets there, keep all pieces of code or even other files, so that you can somehow allocate it to someone where it came from and who was it used for. But again, identification is a big issue, especially in situation where you have security incidents and you have to act very fast. You may have these lists somewhere, spreadsheets and repository databases, but connecting the dots requires a lot of passion, because you need to know, you need to anticipate what belongs together, what am I actually looking for. So categorization may help there. Categorization not only by saying, oh, this is a physical hardware, this is a TV, or there's a screen, or this is a file, but also maybe some other logical groups like geographical allocations or business function specific grouping, so that in case of a security incident, if you know one asset out of this group, and it can have multiple overlaying groups from different aspects, that you immediately know what is the radius of impact, who else is affected, and what else should we look for, because normally during a security issue, you not only go for that affected asset, you have to decide which kind of degree you want to investigate, and secondary or third, which user is where, whose access could have been compromised. So at the end of the day, you still have to keep it simple. Even though just now what I outlined sounds very complicated, sounds very complex, and you may wonder, how am I documenting this? I need to have a whole team running this. keep it simple. But on the other side, if you look here in the opinion corner of the overview, technically, from a security standpoint, the more it is unstructured, the harder it is for the intruder and attacker to anticipate. If all your servers have running numbers, anyway, your IPs have running numbers, but if your servers have even particular names that have country, business function in it, you could easily guess and follow these like 2-digit country, 3-digit business function or running numbers. It's a little bit like guessing the names will be easy, and it will be easier for the attacker also to see when he knows 2 assets, what other assets might be there listed in between. Especially even when running numbers, is it 1,000 assets? If you have 1,000 assets and you use running numbers to 10,000, it will be harder for them to guess what asset is missing and what is not. So sometimes the more messy it is, the easier it is. So at least avoid any patterns. I know it's easier to look at the asset and let's say server name and try to outline from the name what is it used for, where is it used, how critical is it, and but the same the attacker would experience. So without any single documentation, he or she would be able to anticipate what's it for, and probably even find steps for lateral move. So therefore I recommend little but consistent documentation. So again, naming convention can be messy, structure can be messy, but you make a very simple documentation, something that you can easily open up and use. It could be just a spreadsheet, because Excel nowadays has so many line items. It's just enough. But you have one file with everything in it, and you can quickly maneuver and say what else is affected, what else is related, where are the users located, and how are they having privileges on these assets. And the biggest thing, again, questionable, you could say, well, I can keep old assets intact and they serve like a honeypot for attackers, but technically the more of these things you have, the more you have to protect, the more you have maintenance effort, and that could lead to other problems. So I would say there the decision would be remove the unused. Then rather build dedicated honeypots and leave a couple of vulnerabilities open that for an attacker, they will be drifting into this direction and attack these assets because they seem to be low-hanging fruits. But if you have too many low-hanging fruits, that will be also tricky, because there is a certain correlation to the actual productive assets that you're using. And therefore will be very, even the honeypots you have to protect. It's not that you absolutely abandon them just to let the hacker trap into it. So therefore, you may have to find a way how to balance this. And that's then the only way to reassess it frequently. Of course, with cloud rooms and resources in the cloud, it becomes even more difficult to distinguish, because their resources are created from one day to another or within a minute. Then you decommission them again. So there are tools for that. We will cover it in a separate sharing, because that would lead too far in this moment. But let's say good old on-prem infrastructure and physical hardware, which every company has. Keep it simple. Don't put too much in terms of patterns, and so it's not anticipative, but have a very strong and constantly updated documentation. Only that will help you to stay on top of your inventory management, and also if you need to identify the asset, you have a much faster reach. And again, don't forget, it's not just physical and abstract assets. You may also consider your users or certain privileges as an asset. Because again, we do this to figure out what we need to protect and why, and what's the best way to do it.